Welcome, I'm Catherine Hadro, and this is EWTN Pro-Life Weekly.
And welcome to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Virtual Plenary Assembly.
Bishops meeting. The U.S. bishops are meeting virtually this week in their first General Assembly since President Joe Biden took office. We're joined by USCCB Pro-Life Chair Archbishop Joseph Naumann to discuss his top priorities and the topic of Eucharistic Coherence. Surgeon says. Dr. Ben Carson, retired pediatric neurosurgeon and former cabinet secretary, opens up about how his time in the operating room helped shape his strong pro-life beliefs today.
Life is the foundation of all other rights. The very fact that this hearing is being held shows that everyone in this room was granted the privilege to retain that right, a privilege I was denied.
Survivor Speaks. Abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden shared her powerful testimony on Capitol Hill this week, speaking out against dangerous pro-abortion legislation. Hear what she told lawmakers and more as she joins us in studio. The U.S. Catholic bishops are meeting virtually this week for their first General Assembly since President Joe Biden took office. Division among U.S. bishops was clear from the start during what was supposed to be a simple and procedural agenda approval. But there was a motion early on to remove time limits on Eucharistic coherence discussions. When some bishops raised concern this could be a delay tactic on the discussion, a number of other bishops then brought up their concerns of withholding Holy Communion to pro-abortion politicians. Those voices included Bishop John Stowe and Cardinal Blaise Cupich.
Rather than seeing this as a delay tactic, it seems that some of the brother bishops want to rush this discussion and to focus the emphasis on a teaching document on the Eucharist about whether our Catholic president is able to receive communion.
We should also have a discussion with Catholic politicians who have positions that are in conflict with the teachings of the Church to find out why they have those positions. That too has not taken place.
While the meeting's agenda includes votes on 9 action items, the one drawing the most attention is on whether the bishops will approve the drafting of a formal statement on the meaning of the Eucharist in the life of the Church. The statement on the Eucharist would include a section on worthy reception, a growing topic of discussion following the inauguration of President Joe Biden. He's only the nation's second Catholic president, but has taken actions on abortion that go against the Catholic Church's teachings on life. Biden has repealed the Global Protect Life policy, appointed pro-abortion cabinet members, and recently removed the pro-life Hyde Amendment from his budget proposal, which would force taxpayer funding of abortion. It's an issue that retired Bishop Michael Pfeiffer made early on in the virtual meeting.
I ask that we take time to discuss these terrible abortion issues of our president and develop a plan or a strategy to counteract them.
Joining us now on Skype is Archbishop Joseph Naumann, the chairman for the U.S. Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities. Thank you for taking the time for this interview, Your Excellency, during what I know is a busy bishops meeting schedule. First, I understand the Pro-Life Committee recently met. Can you give a quick summary on your main topics of discussion and main pro-life agenda items?
Sure, Catherine. You know, our discussion and our agenda is broad. Of course, abortion is the preeminent issue for our conference and certainly for our committee, but we also had discussions on the document that the Vatican released not too long ago called Samaritanus Bonus about the care for the sick and the elderly. So we also track particularly issues that relate to assisted suicide or euthanasia. And so we think that document is an important one. It gives a lot of good guidance, and it may have some impact even on when we revise the ethical and religious directives for healthcare. We also talked about vaccines and some of the ethical issues and a lot of the controversies around them. We also discussed Walking with Moms in Need, our effort to increase the resources for those with a difficult pregnancy, and how this is particularly urgent at this time. And then we talked about, this distressing development of the efforts of the president, the Speaker of the House, and others to remove the Hyde Amendment and to coerce all Americans to be complicit in abortion by funding it through taxpayer dollars.
And that's what
So
I want
those
to,
were
yes.
some of the issues.
And that's exactly what I want to ask you about. This is our first bishops' meeting during Biden's presidency. And as you just mentioned, the president recently released his budget proposal, which excluded the Hyde Amendment. Can you just speak, what is your reaction to that, particularly that a Catholic president's budget proposal would allow for the taxpayer funding of abortion?
Yeah, this is tremendously sad and disappointing, and not unexpected, unfortunately. And this, I think, illustrates how the abortion advocates have changed their rhetoric and have changed their objectives. They no longer talk about choice, or very rarely do, only when it's convenient. But now they talk about abortion as a right. And they do this because they, unfortunately, it's an outflow of the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't in anything that Congress passed, but in the regulations where they made up this idea that abortion was preventive health care. And once you start defining it as health care, then they extrapolate and say, well, everybody has a right to health care. Everybody has a right to abortion. Well, obviously, abortion's not health care. It destroys the life of a child. It scars the mother and the father. And so in no way is it health care. But that's what the president is basing this on. It's particularly just so disconcerting that this president, who likes to identify himself as a devout Catholic, would do something that's so contrary to our Catholic teaching and our moral tradition.
Absolutely, and I understand you are encouraging Catholics to go sign a petition at notaxpayerabortion.com. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's what we need to do as citizens right now. Our elected representatives need to hear from us, whether they support the Hyde Amendment or not. If they support, they need our encouragement. If they don't, they need to hear that their constituents are noticing this and are distressed.
Absolutely. Well, Your Excellency, speaking about the U.S. Bishops meeting this week, the big topic is on Eucharistic coherence. Early on in the meeting, there was a motion to remove time limits on discussion on that, and you called that a delay tactic. Did you want to say anything else on that? But I also want to ask you if you can speak to the Church's teachings on Holy Communion for public figures who go against the Church.
Yeah, sure, Catherine. Yeah, I think a lot of bishops, obviously this is an important issue, and it was kind of confusing, the issue, to say, well, we need more time to discuss this. Again, what we're talking about at this meeting is simply approving the doctrine committee to go forward with this document. And we don't do anything fast as a bishops' conference. We act slow and deliberately. And so there's a whole process in place where bishops will have the opportunity to give input. But this effort by a few that were orchestrating this, I think was really attempt to try to filibuster, even allowing the doctrine committee to go forward and draft a document, which then we'll discuss, we can modify, we can amend. There's all sorts of opportunities for bishops to have input. And, I think that this obviously is a problem. That one of our bishops even got up and said, well, we haven't talked with our politicians about this. Well, that shows there's a problem if we're not having those discussions. They also bring up the issue, well, we've already spoken about this in 2006, and that's true, but we're at a different point now. Just as I mentioned before, that we're no longer talking about abortion being a choice, but we're talking about it being a right. So we need to speak again to this, and also the fact that we have this Catholic president, this Catholic Speaker of the House, that are the ones that are pushing this agenda forward. And my final comment would be, it's distressing to me when I talk to non-Catholics in the Congress, and they can say to me, they say, Archbishop, we could pass any pro-life measure you want. Just get the Catholics to vote with us. So that's, I think, where we are. And so we need to speak to this. And when we receive the Eucharist, we're not only professing our faith in the real presence of Jesus, but we profess our faith in the church that's empowered by Jesus to make himself present in the Eucharist. And I would just encourage people to look at what we ask somebody that's coming into the church from another Christian denomination to become Catholic, what oath they take before they're admitted to communion. They basically say, I believe all that the Catholic Church teaches and believes to be revealed by God and to be true.
Absolutely.
And so every time we receive the Eucharist, we're essentially saying that as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your clarity on this and, again, for taking the time to be with us. Archbishop Joseph Naumann, Chairman for the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Pro-Life Activities. Thank you.
Thanks. God bless.
God bless. For in-studio analysis, we're joined by Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief for EWTN News, and Prudence Robertson, Communications Associate at the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you both for being here. Good to have you both in studio. Prudence, this is the first U.S. Bishops meeting since President Joe Biden took office. Can you just recap for us what have been all the abortion actions he's taken since becoming president?
Yes, well, Catherine, despite his claims of being Catholic, Joe Biden is truly the most radical pro-abortion president that our nation has ever seen. He wants to unravel and destroy the Protect Life Rule and the Global Protect Life Rule, which protects taxpayers from funding abortion at home and overseas. His budget that was just introduced guts the Hyde Amendment, which is long-standing bipartisan language that keeps taxpayer money out of the abortion industry. He's also appointed radical pro-abortion activists to his cabinet, such as Xavier Becerra, who continuously denies that a law exists in this country stopping partial birth abortion. And, you know, polling shows that the majority of Americans support common sense legislation that would humanize our laws. So it really just goes to show all of these actions that he's not working to unify the country as he promised on the campaign trail.
And it is extreme, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matthew, looking at the U.S. Bishops meeting so far, abortion was brought up early on in the meeting by retired Bishop Michael Pfeiffer. Can you speak to that moment?
Well, it was a dramatic moment. It was literally right at the very start of the meeting. And one of the points that he made, and this is an important one, is that we are talking about a draft document on the life of the Eucharist in the church, the role of the Eucharist in the life of the church. One of the things that he raised, however, is sort of the elephant in the room, which is while this document, this draft, is not likely to name anyone specific, as a church in the United States and globally, we have a major problem with President Joe Biden. As Prudence just very expertly delineated, this is a very aggressive pro-abortion administration. And Joe Biden is a self-professed Catholic. He talks about the fact that he's a devout Catholic, and yet he holds positions that are directly contrary to the teachings of the church, not just on abortion, but on a host of other issues. So Bishop Pfeiffer really was getting to the problem that we have to deal with separate from this document. This document is going to be important, but we still have a problem as a church in this particular moment.
That's the reality of the situation. I want to delve into this topic of Eucharistic coherence. According to an October 2020 EWTN News Real Clear Opinion research poll, half of Catholics in the U.S. do not believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. Among Catholics who attend Mass at least once a week, more than 30% think the Eucharist is merely a symbol of the body and blood of Jesus. Matthew, this is scandalous. Can you speak to why a catechesis of the Eucharist really is necessary for people to understand why certain actions by pro-abortion politicians are egregious?
So we have this draft document that's being proposed to be written on the Eucharist and the life of the church. We also have a proposal for a plan of Eucharistic revival. The two of them go together, but this revival is essential for no other reason than the numbers you just cited. We are looking at a classic catastrophic failure of catechesis for American Catholics, and you can extend this again globally. This is a problem for us that we need to solve, and it ties directly into the question of pro-abortion politicians, but it extends also to all of us. We all need to be much more aware and celebrate and treasure the real presence in the Eucharist, but then we have to make ourselves worthy, if we actually believe that, to receive. And for a Catholic politician who dissents from church teaching on the preeminent issue of our time of abortion, to then receive communion so openly and flagrantly, It causes scandal and it causes confusion at a time when, as our poll indicates, we have a great deal of confusion to begin with.
Absolutely. You know, Prudence, Pew Research reports that about 30% of our current Congress is Catholic, but we know that not every Catholic member of Congress votes pro-life. What excuse do they give, and what's your response to that?
Well, you know, Catherine, at SBA List, we're not religiously affiliated, but so many of us are Catholic. We are motivated by our faith, which teaches us, just as Dr. Bunson said, that abortion is the preeminent moral issue. Now, these so-called Catholic politicians, they claim that they're taking a more holistic viewpoint when they prioritize other issues over abortion. But that holistic viewpoint is pointless if they're not, these children aren't even given a chance to take their first breath, That is the most important thing that we need to fight for, and it's so important to stand up for that. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's fundamental. Real quick, Matthew, I just wanted to hit on one more point. Is this whole conversation on Eucharistic coherence just about President Joe Biden, or when has it been in the works?
This has been in the works for decades. We can go all the way back to 1984. We had Mario Cuomo using, I'm Catholic, but I oppose abortion, but I would never impose my beliefs on other people. We had Geraldine Ferraro, who had her tangle with Cardinal John O'Connor. We had John Kerry in 2004. Now we have an actual second Catholic president in President Joe Biden. So, as I was saying, this document that's coming out is not intended just to deny Joe Biden communion. It doesn't have that authority anyway. But what it does do is it needs to build on the reality that this is a problem we have had for a long time as a church, and it's high time, I think, for us to address it clearly and coherently.
Well, thank you both for your great analysis and insight. Prudence Robertson and Dr. Matthew Bunson, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Dr. Ben Carson tells EWTN Pro-Life Weekly that we all have a moral responsibility to protect the unborn. In part 2 of our interview, the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development opens up to us about how it was his time spent as a pediatric neurosurgeon that helped to shape his pro-life views, especially when he would operate on babies who were still in the womb. Here is part 2 of our interview with Dr. Ben Carson. I want to turn now to your career as a pediatric neurosurgeon. You truly are an expert on the unborn child. Can you just speak to the reality of the unborn child based on what you saw in the operating room, and did that shape your pro-life beliefs?
Well, there was a time when I was pro-choice, and I said, I don't believe in killing little babies, but what right do I have to tell somebody else what they should do? So, I was pro-choice. And then it struck me one day as I was reading about slavery. And I said, what if the abolitionists had said, well, I don't believe in slavery, but you guys can do what you want to do? What would be going on in our country even today? So I think there is a responsibility, a moral responsibility that we have when we know things are being done incorrectly, when we know that little tiny innocent babies are being slaughtered. And you don't have to wait very long beyond conception to see that that's a little baby. At 6 or 8 weeks, you can see that little nose and those little lips and ears and little fingers and toes and the heart's beating. I was at a banquet, and a woman came up to my wife, and she said, "Are you Dr. Carson's wife?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Your husband operated on me when I was still in my mother's womb. And now today she's a grown woman, fully capable of supporting herself, beautiful young lady. And for that reason, you'll never convince me that what's in a mother's womb is a meaningless bunch of cells."
To that point, I think something that is so scandalous, Dr. Carson, is that there are some hospitals that will perform surgery on an unborn child like you used to do, but then in a separate hospital wing, perform abortions on different unborn children. Your thoughts on that, how some unborn babies' lives are truly fought for while others are snuffed out?
Well, I think that's a real responsibility that we have to help people to recognize that these are individuals, these are human beings, they need our help. You know, I was at a conference in South Africa, and the head of the ACLU was bragging about how they are the ones who speak for those who can't speak for themselves. So I said, a woman came to me, she was 33 weeks pregnant, and she was on her way to Kansas to get an abortion because that was the only place in the country that would still do it that late. And I talked her out of it, and she had the baby. Had a neurological deficit. I had to operate on the baby, but the baby's fine. She loves the baby. She's so glad she didn't kill that baby. But I asked him, would you speak for that baby? That's a baby that couldn't speak for itself. A baby 33 weeks, viable outside the womb. He hemmed and hawed and skirted the issue. Later on that night at dinner, I said, let me make it easy for you. I said, I operate on little kids that are 25, 26, 27 weeks gestation. They're in an incubator. They're getting maximum support. Would you speak for them? He said, absolutely. I said, but the one that's several weeks further advanced and is in the safest place in the universe it can be, you can't speak for that one. And he says, I realize that doesn't make any sense, but I believe the woman has the right to kill the baby until the second it is born. And I said, will you say that out loud? And he said, no. But now they will say it out loud. Now they even talk about killing babies that have been born. You know, we're going to look back on this time sometime in the future and say those people were barbarians.
Dr. Ben Carson, founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I enjoy always being with you, and be courageous.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Coming up, abortion numbers in England and Wales hit a record high in 2020. I speak out next.
My arrival into this world was not so much a birth, but an accident. A live birth after a saline infusion abortion.
Abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden was on Capitol Hill this week and joins us in our DC studio after the break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. A record number of abortions took place in England and Wales last year. That is this week's Speak Out segment. New statistics reveal there were nearly 211,000 abortions in England and Wales in 2020. That is the highest number there since the Abortion Act of 1967 was introduced. When you take a close look at the numbers, you'll see disturbing trends. Abortion pills through the mail became the most common abortion procedure. Telemedicine abortion accounted for 47% of abortions in England and Wales between April to December 2020. 3,083 abortions took place because of an unborn baby's disability diagnosis. The UK government is currently deciding whether or not to make abortion pills through the mail permanent post-pandemic. During what was a record high year of abortions in England and Wales, the most common procedure entailed mothers taking abortion pills, which they got through the mail at home alone, to end the life of their own child. We need to mourn that. 2020 was a year of so much tragedy and death and loss of life, and now we know that tragic year of loss also entailed the tragic loss of so many unborn babies. The abortion industry would like you to think abortion pills are harmless, easy enough you can get them through the mail and take without supervision. But you need to know abortion pills cause severe cramping, contractions, and heavy bleeding to force an unborn baby out. It is dangerous for a woman to be home alone as this happens. You also need to know that abortion pill reversal is possible after a woman takes the first of 2 pills. As abortion pills become a more common procedure, we need to spread the word about the reality of abortion pill reversal. In the face of a record year for abortion in England and Wales, let us pray that God transforms the culture so we can soon celebrate a record year of life going forward.
Every story is important. Every experience deserves to be heard. However, when we hear stories about abortion, the narrative is woefully one-sided. I'm here today to ask if there's space in this abortion narrative for stories like mine. How do you reconcile my rights as a woman who survived a failed abortion with what's being discussed here today? We must have a conversation about this going forward in our country.
That is abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden sharing her powerful testimony on Capitol Hill this week. Senate Democrats called for a hearing on the Women's Health Protection Act. Legislation pro-lifers warn would expand abortion on demand and repeal important pro-life protections. Ohden was one of two pro-life witnesses called to testify. And here joining us now is Melissa Ohden, an abortion attempt survivor and the founder and director of Abortion Survivors Network. Melissa, welcome back. Thank you for coming to D.C. to speak so boldly to our lawmakers. This hearing was all about the Women's Health Protection Act. During the hearing, Senator Ted Cruz said that name is misleading. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. There was nothing in that discussion yesterday that was about caring about women's health. It wasn't about health care at all. It was about abortion.
Yeah, absolutely. During your testimony, Melissa, you mentioned that your unique experiences and sufferings are often overlooked or played down as political fodder. Can you expand on that? What did you mean?
You know, I've testified before Congress multiple times, and this time I really felt like they needed to understand more what it's like to live as an abortion survivor in a country that continues to talk about abortion being a choice and a right. And in this conversation, in this hearing about using our taxpayer dollars to fund abortion, making abortion on demand without apology, there is no more room for us to continue to go down that path. They have to face people like me who survive failed abortions.
Absolutely, and you have such a powerful witness. And so while you're here, I wanted to ask you, I know you are Catholic, you're a convert to Catholicism. Do you, from your perspective as an abortion attempt survivor, do you have a message for our Catholic President Joe Biden?
There is no responsible path a Catholic can take in identifying themselves to be pro-choice when that choice is the innocent taking of a human life.
Wow, well said. That's so clearly said. Melissa, during your testimony, you posed a very powerful question asking, do we ever create space for the stories of women who regret their abortions? Why did you want to raise that point?
They don't just dismiss abortion survivors in this predominant narrative about abortion as a choice and a right. They are leaving out the voices of so many women and men who have been wounded by abortion. So women like my birth mother, Ruth, who were coerced and forced. You know, the women and men who regret the role that they played in abortion decisions. You know, they are leaving out the voices of former abortion clinic workers and abortionists. They are silencing each and every one of us, Catherine, who are pro-life. And now is the time for all of us to stand up, be bold, and use our voices and refuse to be silenced by them any longer.
Absolutely, and thank you for being bold and for speaking up. So appreciate seeing you. It's so good to see you. Melissa Ohden, founder and director of Abortion Survivors Network. Thank you. And before we say goodbye, we first want to say Happy Father's Day to all biological, adoptive, and spiritual fathers out there. Strong men who support and love mothers and babies are crucial to building a culture of life. So happy Father's Day to all dads out there. And of course, happy Father's Day to my own dad. I love you. That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.